Now, there is a vast array of characters that we see throughout the 11 seasons of The Walking Dead, and many of them get plenty of screen time to shine and develop. However, some are thrown to the wayside, and it's these exact characters I wanted to focus on in today's video. Now, if you've been subscribed to my channel for a while, you will know I have done a plethora of wasted potential videos for characters in The Walking Dead. But today, I wanted to give a definitive answer to who I believe was done dirtiest by the writers. So, sit back, relax, and let's see who, in my opinion, is the biggest waste of potential in the entire Walking Dead. Abraham is quite a unique case on this list, as unlike many others, he did get screen time, a fleshed out backstory, and multiple love interests. So you may be asking, how is he wasted potential? And it all comes down to his time of death. We first meet Abraham in season 4 episode 10, so we do in fact get over 2 seasons of screen time with him in. When we meet him, he's a driven man on a mission to deliver Eugene to Washington, as he believes Eugene is humanity's last hope. However, after finding out Eugene has been lying to him this whole time, he beats him within an inch of his life. This mission to deliver him to Washington was in many ways Abraham's last reason to keep going. He'd lost everything during the outbreak, his wife, his children, and his sense of purpose. And when it all turned out to be made up, he lost himself. He questioned his relationship with Rosita and whether he even wanted to continue living in this brutal world. But then he met Sasha. She gave him purpose again and reignited the spark within him. And just as his relationship with her had started to show us a different side to the character, he was killed off. Now, I don't have a problem with the writers killing off key characters or characters who are midway through a storyline, because it feels more realistic that way. And having him killed by Negan was a great way to demonstrate to us just how formidable he truly was. But not only did they choose to leave it on a cliffhanger as to who Negan would kill, when we finally got round to seeing season 7, they killed both him and fan favourite Glenn off in the same episode, meaning his death was massively overshadowed and stole a lot of the emotional weight. Glenn's storyline had somewhat come to a natural conclusion, as Abraham's was just seemingly beginning. He wanted to have a child with Sasha, and he'd started falling in love with life again. But as always, he dropped some iconic last words, those being, "suck my nuts." I think the character of Abraham just had so much more to give. I would have loved to have seen the 6'5" military trained beast in the Savior War, see how he would react to Eugene joining Negan's side, explored his military past and backstory a bit more, rather than just a singular flashback, and see him have a child with Sasha. Now, maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but even his comic book death, although coming earlier on in the Savior War, for those who don't know, Denise essentially received this death in the show, would have just separated the moment from Glenn's death. So although it sounds massively counterintuitive, killing off a character who I think has wasted potential earlier on in the show, but stick with me here. I don't have a problem with the amount of time he spent on the show. I mean, he was on it for over 2 seasons. It's just how he was underutilized at times, and then got massively overshadowed in what was meant to be his biggest moment of the series. Along with his and Glenn's death came a total tonal shift within the show, as these two were a large part of the comedic release we would receive to break up the rather depressing reality of the world our characters lived in. And this wouldn't even be that hard to correct. Give Abraham an episode or 2 in season 6 where we go into more detail about his family and why they were scared of him after killing their attackers, and his journey to even meeting Tara and Glenn in the first place. And after this, you could just give him Denise's death in the show where he's shot by Dwight, and that's pretty much problem solved. As not only does this separate his death from fan favourite Glenn, meaning it doesn't feel overshadowed, but it would also flesh him out just that bit more. Now, there are characters on this list who are done a lot dirtier than Abraham is, but I thought we'd kick it off with everyone's favourite Ginger. Now, I've already made a video on this channel talking about the wasted potential of Axel, so for this section I will be touching more on Oscar as a character rather than Axel. But that being said, both characters more than deserve a spot on this list. We meet these two characters in the season 3 opener, and Oscar lives for 8 episodes whilst Axel lives for 10. Now, although these characters weren't around for very long, we did get sprinkles of backstory, which I would have loved to have seen explored. Being prisoners, we could have seen a whole new perspective on the virus, and it would have been so cool to see a flashback to how Monument Day unfolded in the prison. Similar to Rick, these guys were locked in the cafeteria for months, so they had no idea of the horrors awaiting for them outside of those doors. With these two, I don't mind having one of them die to further develop the other one, but it's the fact that they both died in such quick succession that we never really explored the impact on the other. Oscar's death, in fairness, makes sense, as it showed us Rick's psychological state at the time, as he envisioned one of the Woodbury soldiers as Shane, which ultimately led to Oscar getting shot. And again, Axel's death also made sense from a narrative perspective, as they needed to demonstrate the threat of the governor, so having him kill one of our group was probably the right move. So what is my solution here? Well, I'd probably have T-Dog not die at all in Season 3 Episode 4, not only taking his death out of the shadow of Laurie's, but give him Oscar's death at Woodbury, as it still would have been a heroic send-off for T-Dog, and would have probably made Rick feel even worse for freezing on the battlefield. Then, when the governor comes to take revenge, he could kill either one of them, leaving the other one alive, to maybe die in the Season 4 mid-finale during the fall of the prison. Axel had just started getting close to Carol, and that relationship would have been interesting to explore. I also don't know why, or if this is just me, but I always got very uneasy vibes from Axel. So even having him adapted to be a secondary antagonist to the governor would have been really cool. Imagine if they turned him into the serial killer in the prison from the comics. Not only would this have made the show a lot darker, but it also would have utilised his character a lot more. And in regards to Oscar, in the show we learn he had a wife and kids. However, as soon as he's told about the virus affecting the whole planet, he just accepts they're dead with seemingly no emotion or evidence. He just goes about his day like nothing's happened. If you kept Oscar alive, it would have been nice to know a bit about him, why he was in prison, who his family are, and his story. I'm not asking to make both of them the front cover of the show, but just have them stick around for a little while longer so we could learn more about their individual stories. I mean, hell, the footage is so hard to find that what you're seeing on screen right now is about every scene these two characters are in. So for me, that's why these two prisoners belong on this list. Arguably the poster children of wasted potential among the Walking Dead characters, I think Noah and Beth deserve this spot together. Now again, I have made longer, more detailed videos on both of these characters separately, but these two without a doubt deserve to be on this list. So let's start with Beth. We meet Beth on Herschel's farm and she sticks around until her death in Season 5. The thing is with Beth, we didn't know much about her until just before her passing. One of my absolute favourite moments of Season 4 is the Daryl and Beth dynamic. It was so unexpected, but it just worked. She's very much a slow burner, starting off in the background before making her way to the forefront of our screens. My biggest problem with Beth's death, geez that's a tongue twister, is the whole hospital arc. It just didn't really work for me. It feels like a narrative way to get our characters from point A to B whilst offering us a quote unquote shocking death. However, not only do they kill Beth off before she could fully complete her development, making her death feel frustrating rather than meaningful, but the whole storyline just felt like a waste of time. Beth's abduction in Season 4 set up an exciting mystery and offered us a look into a new setting with a unique conflict. But instead of being a part of the major storyline here, Beth's plot is relegated to the sidelines, barely impacting the main narrative at all, which made her whole story feel so isolated. The manner in which she was killed as well is infuriating. She stabbed Dawn with a pair of scissors, which felt so out of character since Beth had always been smart about survival, and meant her development with characters like Daryl, Herschel and Noah meant nothing in the end. Beth was always one of the group's last untouched survivors, remaining optimistic and hopeful, which in many ways set her apart from our other hardened survivors. And me personally, I would have loved to see Beth make it to Alexandria. The show also needed more well-developed female characters, and Beth suits this to a T. She deserved to go out in a way that felt so much more meaningful, and she essentially sacrifices herself inadvertently to free Noah. But it's alright, because he becomes a staple for the later seasons of the show. Oh, what's that? He dies 6 episodes later in one of the most graphic scenes in the entire show. Right, brilliant. Maybe everybody does hate Chris after all. I think the death of Noah just further demonstrates how bad Beth's death actually was, as we went through all that trouble for every single person in the Grady Memorial story arc to be dead before the end of season 5. After Noah's freed from Dawn's grasp, we watch him revisit his previous settlement, finding the reanimated corpses of his slaughtered family, which was caused by the wolves. And although we do get a somewhat touching scene, it would all come in vain as he dies just a few episodes later. Noah had just expressed interest in architecture to Reg Monroe, hinting at a possible future storyline for him, and had also developed a close friendship with Glenn. Having Noah stick around at least until the lineup where he could have seen Glenn die at the hand of Negan right in front of his very eyes would have fleshed out his character so much more. On top of this, Noah has arguably one of the most tragic backstories in the show. After his father went missing, he went out to look for him. He is then abducted by Dawn, getting trapped at the Grady Memorial Hospital, before eventually being freed by Beth, ultimately laying down her life to do so, before returning home only to find his entire family slaughtered. His grief and trauma could have led to some truly great development, and his survivor's guilt and emotional depth could have made him one of the most compelling characters in the whole show. But he's killed off in a death which, whilst being incredibly gruesome, feels like a moment to shock the audience rather than make sense from a narrative perspective. Put very bluntly, the writers essentially sacrificed 2 beloved characters for Noah, those being Beth, when she stabs Dawn trying to free him, and Tyrese by visiting his previous settlement. And what do we get in return for those pretty noteworthy character deaths? Well, we get a couple of scenes with Noah before he's brutally ripped apart just a few episodes later. It never really made sense to me, and that's why Noah belongs on this list. The missed opportunities with Morales are endless. This season 1 OG left the camp in Atlanta with his family in episode 5 of season 1, and many thought that was it. We would never see him again. But 7 years later, he would make his return to the show. Now this got fans incredibly hyped, as there weren't many OG characters left. Social media teased his return, and on October 29th, it happened. Morales was back, for approximately 5 minutes. He holds Rick at gunpoint, the two have a short discussion about their journeys leading up to this point, and then Daryl shoots him in the head, killing him. This felt like a huge missed opportunity for the show. I mean, we did learn that Morales' family did die, but I want to know how. Who recruited him to the Saviors? Where did he go after Atlanta? I just have so many questions, which could have all been answered in a short bottle episode centered around Morales. Not only could this have given us a refreshing break from the constant back and forth between the Saviors and our group that had been going on for 2 straight seasons at this point, but it also would have been so interesting. I mean, the writers managed to do it with Negan in season 10 with the episode Here's Negan, so just taking that time to flesh him out would have been so much better than what we eventually got. I mean, I still don't even know why Morales and his family left in season 1, so it was definitely the right call bringing him back into the show. It's just the execution left so much to be desired. And I get that his return is meant to symbolise just how much has changed since it all began, and in many ways season 8 represents the moral battle between all of our characters, as it's probably the most feral and morally grey season of them all, ultimately doing some heinous acts for the sake of survival. And it takes Carl's death for Rick to finally realise that this isn't how the world has to be. But even if the writers were adamant in killing Morales off, you could have at least have him led an outpost or become a secondary antagonist at the very minimum, even if it's just for 1 or 2 episodes. We just needed so much more time with the character than what we eventually got, and it's a massive shame. Now, in many ways, Pope was just a stopgap to fill in the narrative until our group discovered the Commonwealth, and that's absolutely fine. The Reapers as a concept and in the battle scene where they ambush our group at night are awesome, but their leader Pope ultimately falls short of the mark for me. which is a massive shame because this guy had been built up quite a lot leading to his introduction. I mean, his own soldiers would kill themselves before revealing any information about their leader, so he was built up to be a serious threat to our group. But he appears in only 4 episodes, which if done correctly, as we saw with Joe in season 4, is more than enough. But unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way for Pope. We get an incredibly rushed storyline and a quick resolution, and as a character, he has a severely underdeveloped backstory. We learn little about his past or his motivations, we just blindly follow him leading a militant group hunt down a couple of survivors. I mean, this is a group of military trained special forces. These guys should be like the Avengers of the Apocalypse, but instead they are dispatched in just a couple of episodes with relative ease without any real casualties. I guess Alden does die, but still the Pope had all the lead up and suspense to be a way cooler villain than he actually turned out to be. Pope's apparent belief in a divine intervention or higher purpose is a very interesting concept, and I would have loved to have seen this explored, especially with the character of Gabriel, as he battles with his own religious beliefs in season 11. And I know we get that scene with Gabe and the pastor, which I did really enjoy. I just wish we'd seen more of that with the Pope. But ultimately, the Pope was built up to be this big bad capable villain, and he just falls short of the mark for me. Oh, Carl. I mean, where do I even begin here? Now, this is a character who we know everything about. I mean, he's in the show for over 8 seasons, many of us grew up in real time as Carl grew up in the show, and he is a staple of The Walking Dead, and in many ways is the driving factor of the narrative. If you strip down the show to its core aspects, it's a story about a father and son, as Rick would do anything to protect Carl. He gave purpose to the main protagonist, and with his death the show felt empty in a way. Rick had lost his driving force, and the show had no real end point in sight. The problem here isn't down to a lack of screen time or backstory. In fact, in the case of Carl, that comes in abundance. But it's arguably the death of the future of the show. After his death, viewership plummeted, and for many fans it was the last straw. The wasted potential that lies with Carl was the future of the franchise. The show had laid down the foundations of a boy who grew up in chaos, losing his way and becoming a cold and capable killer, to eventually learning just how precious life really was. He had grown up in an apocalyptic hellhole, but had somehow managed to cling on to his humanity, and all signs pointed to him being the eventual lead of the show, with Andrew Lincoln being very vocal about stepping back from his role as Rick Grimes. We were all waiting for Carl to take that leap and become the group's main leader. But ultimately, that would never happen. Carl would be killed off, Rick and Michonne would be written out of the show soon after, and we were left with this awkward transition period with essentially a whole new cast in The Walking Dead. Having Carl stick around would have not only made this transition period easier, but would have also made more sense than thrusting a character who is infamously known for their isolation in Daryl Dixon becoming a leader. What rubs salt into the wound for me is we have a timeline in which Carl does survive, that being the comics, so we have a glimpse into how the story could have been, which hurts even more as we don't have to speculate about how great Carl could have been because we know it for a fact. Again, I've already made a whole video surrounding this subject matter, so I won't go over it in too much detail in this video, but I think the death of Carl was not only a wasted potential for his individual character, but also the future of the franchise. So, who in my opinion is the biggest waste of potential? Well, what if I was to tell you I hadn't even mentioned this character's name yet? Does anyone come to mind? Drumroll please. The biggest waste of potential in The Walking Dead is Andrea Harrison, and it's by quite some margin. Andrea's problem is unique on this list in the sense of that she does get fleshed out and has a large amount of screen time, but the writers just make her so unlikable and force her to make these baffling decisions. Again, the comic book Andrea is a strong, capable, and keyword here, likeable character. She goes on to live all the way until the Whisperer War and becomes Rick's wife. And the show clearly hints at this during season 1, but for whatever reason, whether it was the firing of Frank Darabont or just deciding to go a different direction, this storyline got abandoned. which I'm not complaining about because we eventually got to see Rishon. But still, it's like the writers had no idea what to do with her character. They often used her in a romantic subplot, whether that be to Shane or the governor. She made baffling decisions like shooting Daryl at the farm, and also staying with the governor after discovering what kind of a person he was. She had this massively prolonged argument with Dale throughout season 2, which felt so unnecessary, as in season 1, that was a dynamic I found myself enjoying quite a lot. They made Andrea so dumb in the show, which was a world away from her comic book counterpart, who is just awesome. Andrea got done so dirty in the show, and unlike Carl, although his death was stupid, at least he got to shine in the show for 8 seasons. Andrea is just annoying and many fans' least favourite character in the entire series. The show just kind of flip-flops about her being this independent and capable character. One moment she's dispatching walkers with ease and leading Woodbury in Philip's absence, and the next moment she's getting manipulated by the governor and is unable to kill the reanimated Milton. The whole thing for me is just incredibly inconsistent, and it felt like the only time we saw any real substance to her character was when she was romantically involved with another more important character. Again, much like Carl, we have a timeline in which Andrea is quite the opposite, but unlike Carl, her time on the show doesn't even come close to doing this character justice. I really want to like Andrea, but I just can't. And the fact her comic book counterpart does exist, for me, is the reason Andrea is the biggest waste of potential in the entire Walking Dead. But in an 11 season show, there are bound to be some missed opportunities, and there are loads more characters that could have made this list. Sasha, Pamela Milton, T-Dog and Dr. Jenna could have all been here. But in a show, sometimes it's necessary to not flesh out every single character, as you risk dilating the overall narrative of the story you're trying to tell. And in fairness to The Walking Dead, they write some of the best characters in all of fiction, so you can't really win them all. But let me know down below in the comments who you guys think is the biggest waste of potential from The Walking Dead. And with that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.